The Crosspoint Church Bellaire location, and I want to say welcome today to those watching this from Crosspoint and also those watching this broadcast at our City Rise, Missouri City location. Most of you know this, things look a little bit different right now, especially if you're used to the live stream from our Crosspoint location, but we were in the middle of some great progress with construction at our campus, and so that is making things a little bit difficult for the next several weeks when it comes to live stream. And so what you'll be experiencing is the sermon only. And that'll only last temporarily, but at least we're able to bring that to you. That also means that you are able to consume the live stream if you want a more robust type of worship experience online. You can go to our YouTube page, that is youtube.com/cityriseorg, and you can watch the entire broadcast from our West U location. That includes music. You can do that at 8:30 and 11, and so we just want to make that available to you if you want to do that. But lots of great stuff happening. We're excited to be together this morning, and pray with me as we get started today. Lord, thank you so much for this day. Thank you that we have the ability to use this technology to worship, to learn, to grow. God, this is a great series, and so we're excited about what you're doing through Flourishing Family. And I pray that this time together in your word, in Ephesians, would be beneficial and fruitful today. I lift all this up in the name of Jesus. Amen. Comedian Tim Hawkins, he's one of my favorite. He wrote a parody of a Green Day song several years ago. The Green Day song that he parodied is called Good Riddance, a real popular song. But he wrote a parody that is really quite helpful for husbands. Maybe you've heard it. I'll read some of the lyrics for you. He says, "Hey honey, have you gained some weight in your rear end? That dress you wear reminds me of my old girlfriend. And where'd you get those shoes? I think they're pretty lame. Would you please stop talking? I'm trying to watch the game." If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. Good advice. He goes on, he sings, "I planned a hunting trip next week on your birthday. I didn't ask you, but I knew it'd be okay. Go make some dinner while I watch this fishing show. I taped it over our old wedding video." If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. Lastly, last phrase, he says, "Your cooking is okay, but it's not like Mother makes. The diamond in the ring I bought you is fake. Your eyes look puffy, dear. Are you feeling ill? Happy anniversary, sweetie. I bought you a treadmill." Again, if you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. Thank you, Tim, for that great advice. I think that those things certainly would not help your family to flourish. And that's really what we're talking about for the next several weeks. We're in the middle of our Flourishing Family series, and we're really excited about this. And today, we're really talking about husbands. We're talking to the dudes today. And so Paul gives us some advice, just as Tim Hawkins did, about how we as husbands can help our families really flourish. Now, I'm on this journey. I don't have it perfected. I am a fellow traveler like many of you, and so I'm very thankful for what Paul has to say to husbands to help us lead our families, to help us love our wives in really beneficial and fruitful ways. And so today, if you're a husband, I invite you to lean into Ephesians chapter 5 with me. If you may hope to be a husband one day, I invite you to lean in and listen and learn about what your role and what some standards are for you as a husband as well. Maybe you find yourself like, I'm never going to be a husband. I'm a woman and I'm a wife. And so can I check out from this sermon? Absolutely not. Today, you will learn some great things about how you can pray for your wife, or maybe how you can pray for your son or your grandson, or maybe you're single and you hope to be married one day. Today's a great opportunity for you to learn what you should be looking for in a husband one day. Again, Paul gives us great advice. Look at it with me. We're in Ephesians chapter 5, and we're going to go through about 4 or 5 verses today. That's all. But listen to what Paul writes. He says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church." That's in verse 25. "And gave himself up for her." Verse 26. "That he may sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself." In verse 29, "For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church." What a great word for husbands. We're going to dig into this today. And so really what I want us to do is look at 2 things. Pretty simple, but they're hard to do. But if we do these as husbands, then we will really help our families to flourish. Let me give you the first thing that Paul says for husbands to do, to learn, to lean into, to enact. He says, number 1, wear your new clothes. Yes, that's right. Wear your new clothes. Now, if you are a husband or you have been married at some point, you've probably experienced your wife purchasing you clothes to wear. She goes out shopping, she brings you something that she would love for you to wear because she probably doesn't like the stuff that you buy yourself. I mean, let's face it, guys, if shopping were up to us, we would buy underwear like every 20 years or so, right? Holes, no problem. That's fine. They're just broken in. That's just us. Paul says, I want you to wear your new clothes. There's a couple of different things I want to show you that he does to help us understand what this means. Let me read you some verses, and I think the context will become clear. And honestly, husbands, wearing your new clothes is the most important thing today, without question. Look at Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 3 with me. Paul says, "I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace." Did you hear Paul? He said, I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called. So he's saying you've been called to this new life. He goes on in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17. He says, "Now I say this and testify in the Lord that you guys must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds." Do you catch that phrase? You must no longer walk as the Gentiles do. That means, hey, at one time you were walking and your lifestyle was this way, but something has happened, and I'm urging you and encouraging you that something has changed and something has happened. So don't walk like you used to, walk in the new, right? He keeps going with this in verses 22 through 24 of Ephesians. He says, "Guys, put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness." Do you catch those things? He says, hey, put off the old and put on the new, meaning something has happened, something has changed that is very significant. And final verse I want you to see is Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1. He says, "Therefore be imitators of God as His beloved children." Again, you're God's children. This is significant. Paul says, wear your new clothes. So all throughout Ephesians chapter 4, we see Paul emphasizing that something significant has happened in the lives of these people in Ephesus. You see, they've come to know Jesus. The old is gone and the new is here. And so he says, hey, stop wearing those old clothes that you used to wear and start wearing the new clothes that God gave you through faith in Jesus. You are saved. You are free. Something has changed in you. You've been redeemed and adopted, and now, like, you've got these new clothes that you can wear. So stop wearing the old and start wearing the new. This is the starting point, I believe, that Paul starts from when he's talking to husbands. He's like, guys, you have to live in the new life that's been provided for you in Christ. Wear the new clothes. Now, there's a great picture of these new clothes, if you will, in Luke chapter 15. You may know the story. It's the story of the prodigal son coming home. He's been working in the mud, working as a pig farmer, sharing food with pigs. Man, his beard's all a mess. His clothes are filthy. He's disgusting. He's smelly. He's just really, really hard to even look at. Well, he decides to fall on the mercy of his dad, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if he came home, that his dad would receive him and not reject him. And so he throws all of his eggs in that basket. So he rounds the corner, heads to his dad's house. The father sees him a long way off as he's headed home. And what does the father do? The father receives him. He doesn't reject him. He has compassion on him, the father does. He doesn't cancel him because he's screwed up. Listen to what the father says in Luke chapter 15, verse 22. He gets his son, he hugs him, he embraces him. Luke 15 tells us he even kisses him. Remember, he's disgusting at this point. He's filthy. And listen to Luke chapter 15, verse 22. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and put shoes on his feet. Did you hear the dad? He says, son, I have new clothes for you. The same as what Paul is saying. You're new. Live new. Wear the new clothes. And that's important. Husbands, we gotta keep that in our minds all the time, really every day when we wake up. We need to be asking ourselves, hey, am I wearing the new clothes God has given me through my relationship with Jesus? Or maybe you're tuning in today and the question for you is this: do I have new clothes? Like, do I have a relationship with Jesus? Because the truth is, in order to help my family flourish, because that's God's plan for your family, He wants it to flourish. But if you want your family to flourish, you have to have new clothes. It starts with a relationship with Jesus. And God, like the dad, is right there waiting to embrace you, waiting for you to just fall on His mercy so that He can graciously give you that robe, that ring, and those shoes that He has for you. Call it forgiveness and grace and mercy. So that's the first point. Wear your new clothes. But then the second point is obvious. It's right here in verse 25, as Paul says this: love your wife. He says, love your wife. Now that sounds simple, right? He says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave Himself up for her. That sounds simple, but listen, it's really hard. It's really hard. And let me share with you why that's hard. Is because that word love right there is the word agapao in the original language of the New Testament. Agapao comes from the word agape, and that is God's type of love, meaning this is that unconditional, never give up on you kind of love. Man, that's hard, isn't it? Here's Paul: husbands, love unconditionally your wives. Love them on their best day and love them on their worst day. Love your wife when she blesses you and serves you and makes life easy for you and meets your needs. And also love your wife unconditionally when she's struggling, when she's making life hard for you in some way, when she is not meeting your needs or even your expectations. Paul's word to husbands is unconditionally, unwaveringly, come what may, never ever give up on her. Now, why does Paul say this? Why is this the instruction for husbands? Well, because people are hard to love. I mean, I don't think that's something you've never experienced before. Our spouses are even hard to love at times. You see, our wives are going to disappoint us at some point and in some way, or make life inconvenient for us at some point in our marriage. Chances are some of you tuning in right now would say, hey, Chris, that is me right now. You're reading my mail. I'm struggling for this reason or that reason to just love my wife unconditionally. And that's why Paul wrote this. He says, man, I get it. I hear you. But it's so powerful when a follower of Jesus unconditionally and decides ahead of time, hey, come what may, for better or for worse, I'm in this thing. And I believe in you and I love you, and we're going to get through anything and everything together as this married couple. And I'm going to lead the way by loving you on your best day and on your worst day. The great theologian Chris Stapleton, love Chris Stapleton, he has a song called Fire Away. I don't know if you've heard it, but it is a song in which he masterfully captures the essence of a man who loves his wife at all times. He loves her in this song when it's pleasant and when it's painful. Give it a listen on YouTube if you get a chance. But if you're like me, I need some handles to grab hold of. I get it. Love my wife unconditionally. I get that. It's hard, but I understand the concept. But how? Can you show me how that might actually flesh itself out? Men, we always need some help, right? Well, thankfully, Paul is good. He's a man. He understands this as well. And so he helps us out. Let me give you three things, three ways in which we can unconditionally love our wife. Here's the first one. We sacrifice. Back to verse 25. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Did you catch that? He loved the church. That word right there again is agapao. He says, I want you to love your wives just as Christ loved the church, same word, and Christ gave himself up for the church. One way we can unconditionally love our wives is to sacrifice for her. We look to Jesus and his example of how he does life with the church, how he walked with the church, how he leads his church. What does he do? Man, he loved the church so much that he laid down his life. He sacrificed his life. He gave himself up voluntarily for the church. No one forced Jesus to die. He did it out of love. John chapter 10, 18 details this. It says, no one, Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and he says, hey, no one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. You see, Jesus was willing to lose so that we could gain. Husbands, that's a word for us. Be willing to lose so that our wife can gain. See, to sacrifice, it means to put her needs before our own. And it looks different in different seasons, right? It could be we sacrifice time, or we sacrifice sleep, or we sacrifice this thing at work, or we sacrifice conveniences or preferences. I would challenge you to just ask yourself, hey, this week, how can I sacrifice for my wife? What does she need from me? How can I surprise her and sacrifice? That's a way to unconditionally love her. Let me give you a second one. Not only do we sacrifice, but we also, according to Paul, we just serve. Look at verse 29. He says this in verse 29, and I love this. For no one hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes our flesh, just as Christ does the church. You see, Christ nourished and cherished the church. When we do that, that's what we communicate to our wife. When we serve her, like we're feeding and we're providing and we're helping and we're healing. When we get uncomfortable, when we when we lay our needs down and we seek to be servants to our wives and to our families, man, that communicates something powerful. It communicates something powerful to a watching world when a Christ follower is not all selfish and consumed with self, but rather they are outward facing, right? And they are serving their wives, serving their family. It's a beautiful picture. Now, one of the ways that I try to do this, imperfectly by the way, is weekly I just try to look at our schedule as a family and sit down with my wife. And when Sonia and I are at our best, we are sitting down one time a week at least and just syncing our lives up together, like schedule-wise. And I'm just trying to ask her, I'm trying to look and say, how can I serve you this week? Where do you need me? What do I need to say no to personally so that I can say yes to something to bless you and to serve you and to surprise you? Whether that's just listening or a date night or picking the kids up from this thing or coming home early from work one day because that helps you do this thing, whatever it is. All of our families are unique. But how can I nourish and how can I cherish her? That's a question to ask this week as you process, how can I serve my wife? How can I actually sacrifice for my wife? Let me give you the third thing. So we sacrifice and we serve. Here's the other one, we sanctify. What in the world does that mean? I know it's a $2 church word, but listen to verses 26 and 27. Here's what Paul says, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. You see, Christ is loving the church, and he's giving up his life, he's giving up his rights for the church so that she may be without spot or wrinkle, so that she might be holy and without blemish. Here's the picture, here's the deal. The reality is when we sacrifice and when we serve our wives, just as Jesus does with the church, he's setting the example, he's the model, we help our wives grow. We help them grow closer to Jesus. We help them grow more in step with Jesus. The outflow of our unconditional love is that we help our wives grow in their walk with Christ. And listen, shouldn't that be one of our goals as husbands? Is that our wives want more of Jesus because they're around us? Like, that's what Paul is getting at. Like, the way in which we do life and love and serve and sacrifice should lead our wives to want more and more of Jesus. Now, that's hard. That's hard. I'm not saying that's easy, and I'm not saying we get it right all the time, but shouldn't that be one of our goals, is to live with our wives and serve them in such a way that they actually want more of Jesus? Man, I hope that's true for you. I know that that's a goal for me, and it's one I don't hit often enough, but certainly true in my life. Here's the deal. Let me give you two things that are true and that are powerful. Here's the first one. My relationship with Jesus as a husband has a direct impact on my relationship with my wife. Like, how I'm doing with Jesus impacts how I'm doing with Sonia. How you're doing with your wife with Jesus has a direct impact on how you're doing with your wife. It's just true. And here's the second thing. My relationship with my wife has the capacity to point people to Jesus. Man, the truth is, people are watching our lives, right? We know that. They're watching us at the ballpark, at the grocery store. They're watching us at church. They're watching us as we drive down the road. They're watching us at work. They're watching us all over the place. And listen, we have the power. We have like agency here. When we're walking in step with Jesus and we're doing great with our spouse, and when we're doing great with our spouse, that preaches the gospel to a watching world. And if we can keep that like front and center, man, people will begin to lean in and say, hey, I'm noticing like something's unique about your family. Something's different about the way in which you do life. That provides an open door for us to actually share the hope of the gospel that we have with people who are all around us in all kinds of environments and arenas. Isn't that incredible? And that's what marriage is for. Like marriage is to build us internally, without a doubt, so that we can serve Jesus externally and share the gospel. It's a great vehicle to share the gospel. You know, one of the things I want to point you to as a resource today, I want you to go on the app and watch our senior pastor and his wife actually share just like a 3 or 4 minute story from their own experience and their own marriage. You can go to the home page of your specific app right there at the City Rise app, and right there under Flourishing Family is going to be a story, a testimony section. Just go there and watch Roger and Julie's story. It's inspiring and it's powerful, and it just helps you to take steps, I guarantee you, to begin to love your wife and to wear those new clothes. So let me give you 4 questions as I close today. Take these, write them down, whatever you need to do with them, but spend some time this week, because I think that's going to help you as a husband or even as a wife pray these things over your husband or your son, or however you come in contact with someone who is a husband this week. Number 1, am I wearing old or new clothes? Such a powerful question. Like we have a choice every day to live in the old or to live in the new. So how are you doing? Am I wearing old or new clothes? Number 2, does conditional or unconditional describe me as a husband? That's a penetrating question, but it's really important. Like, does conditional or unconditional like get to the heart of who I am today as a husband? Answer it honestly. God's not ready to sit there and shame you about that. He just wants to bring that into the light. And so if you're conditional, you have a chance to change some of that. And if it's unconditional, celebrate that and enjoy that. It's really a beautiful thing. Number 3, this week, we've kind of touched on it already, but it's good to revisit this. This week, how can I, as a husband, sacrifice or serve or sanctify my wife? What can I do? You just ask her, hey honey, what do I need to do? What do you need from me this week? And then just look at other areas around you and see how you can surprise her, just being external instead of all internal. I hope that makes sense. How can I sacrifice, serve, and sanctify? Let me give you the 4th thing. Who can I pray for this week? Maybe this is helping you. Oh man, these are some things I can pray for my husband or my son or my grandson. Or these are some things that I can pray over that person at work that's really walking through a tough time in their marriage. But who is God putting in my life or on my mind that I can pray for? Am I wearing old or new clothes? Does conditional or unconditional describe me as a husband? Or this week, how can I sanctify and serve and sacrifice? And who can I pray for? But just some great things for you to chew on this week. I hope this experience in this online community has been a blessing for you today. I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you husbands. I'm praying for myself that we continue to be blessings to our families, because we absolutely want them to flourish. Pray with me. Lord, thank you so much for this day and this time. I pray for every husband out there. I pray that we have the heart to continue to wear the new clothes that you've given us, and that would lead us to places of unconditional love and sacrifice and service to our wives and to the other people in our lives, Lord. Help us to do that, and help us to use our marriages as vehicles to preach and proclaim and share the hope of the gospel that we have.